All right, what is up, YouTube? It's your boy. No, I'm just kidding. Today's video is going to be about something that a lot of men struggle with out there. And that's the topic of pornographic addiction, specifically masturbation addiction. And this is my testimony as to how I was able to finally transcend that at the age of 23 years old. I know I may not look 23 years old, but believe me, that is my age. And so here's my story, basically. Without further delay, I'm just going to tell you how I stopped masturbating and how I quit my pornographic addiction, which was very strong. So let me give you some background of who I am. I'm a very spiritual-minded person, and I always have been. I was raised by two Hispanic parents. I'm half Mexican, half Salvadorian. And my father was like a shaman who would perform necromancy. He was a tarot card reader. He would also channel spirits, like I think one of the spirits that he claimed, whether you believe in channeling or not, this video isn't really about that, although you might be curious as to why I'm talking about these topics about a video that's about porn, and you'll see why. My father claimed to have channeled Egyptian spirits like Tutankhamun, who was the son of Akhenaten way back in the 18th dynasty of Egypt. And as a channeler, I remember that my parents, ever since I was like literally 6 years old, I was in the first grade, I remember my parents telling me that I had reincarnated into this world, Earth, whatever Earth is, you know, from another realm, right? And there wasn't really that much detail about this other place. It was called Ur. And Ur, as I come to learn, is actually the prefix of the word source or origin in the German language. And so Ur basically means like the beginning or the source or the first, whatever you want to call it. And the people there were said to look very human-like, with blonde hair and blue eyes. Similar to what people in the modern UFOlogy sphere online, if you believe in that type of stuff, claim when it comes to the Pleiadians, and they contact people from the stars and all that stuff. If you believe in that stuff, I personally don't really believe in the vast majority of what people say out there. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you, I'm very skeptical about what my dad told me. But ever since I was young, my parents have given me the story that I was a reincarnation, right, of a prince that was part of a royal bloodline of these blonde hair, blue-eyed people from Ur. Okay, and the people from Ur were said to be very advanced, spiritually speaking. They were more aware of spiritual laws, unlike here, where we don't really seem to value that type of stuff. And that's about it. There really isn't much detail about my past lives. My mom, who was never really into spiritism as a younger person, she hooked up with my father because my father gave her a lot of wisdom, a lot of good advice in her life that really radically changed how she used to be and how she used to see herself, and among other things like that. I would say possibly for the better. Although I wasn't back then. I wasn't around back then. I was born in 2002. So way before my time. Now, when it comes to my porn addiction, I've been masturbating since I was like 5 years old. Literally since I was 5 years old, right? I remember when my parents used to play me Disney movies, Cinderella, Snow White, Beauty and the Beast even, and you know, Spider-Man. And I used to masturbate to like Mary Jane. I used to masturbate to Cinderella, right? I remember watching Archer as a kid, and I used to masturbate to the white characters, that redheaded woman, I forgot her name was. And I basically developed an addiction to Caucasian women, Caucasian European women. This doesn't have to do too much with you know, the story that I just provided earlier, but it's going to become more relevant as you continue listening to this video. So I developed a very strong masturbation habit, and since I was very little, my preference has always been European women, or you could say women with blonde hair and blue eyes. You know, I've always been very attracted to what you would call white women, basically Caucasian females, but specifically of the northern western type, right? You know, Germanics and all the various different Germanic tribes that exist. Those are the type of women that I find appealing, right? Not so much like just Caucasian women in general, because obviously if you know anything about that term, you know, Arabs, Persians, Dravidians are considered to be Caucasian, Afghanis are considered to be Caucasian, people from Sri Lanka are considered to be Caucasian. Of course, I'm not referring to those people, right? When I say Caucasian women, I'm specifically talking about the white archetype. And so fast forward, right? I really, first, let me just tell you, I never had a girlfriend in my life. Never touched a girl outside of a professional setting past the age of like 8 years old. I did have girlfriends when I was like 6, 7, 8 years old, but the girlfriends I had, of course, were not romantic partners. They were literally like friends that happened to be girls, friends of family, you know. And I think I may have kissed one of them on the cheek, or I may have hugged them, of course. And I may have flirted with one particular family friend once in a while, maybe, but nothing serious. Obviously, I was just a 7-year-old kid, you know, grew up with no siblings, right? Literally the only child. And so I am 23 years old, and I never even so much as kissed a woman on the lips, right? Of any background. I never even so much as hugged the woman, or even really touched the woman. Like I said, let me drink some water, past the age of like 8 years old. So I got into politics at a young age, you know. I started watching some YouTube videos after coming across some conspiratorial content, and one thing led to another, and I eventually got into far right-wing politics. When I was like a teenager, I was a very avid proponent of fascism and things like that. I read all sorts of good books, like Alfred Rosenberg, Myth of the 20th Century, you know, of course, other material that I can't really mention here on YouTube. And I got really into this idea of, like, you know, the you-know-who's controlling everything. And in the far right-wing spaces, they often talk a lot about the importance of collective idealism, right? Making sure that the race remains pure as a collective unit, as a collective body, you know, to present a good image to the nation and a good image to the citizens. And so, being that I grew up with a very religious mindset, eventually looking into Christianity and things like that, and identifying strongly with Calvinism when I was younger, I was very much of a prude, I guess you could say. No drinking, never drank in my life, no smoking, never experimented with drugs, never experimented with marijuana. I grew up in California, and I lived there throughout my entire life. And really nothing, I never experimented with any type of gang-related activity or anything like that. And I think that's because my mom, who was investing in real estate, we would always move from place to place to place. You know, we used to live in South LA, and then, you know, we moved to Burbank, California, and we lived in a condominium there for a number of years. And then we moved to other locations that were a lot more safe, or you could say less, I don't want to use the word ghetto, but they're not really impoverished areas of California, right? Very diverse, still very Hispanic, but not impoverished. you know. And I had a good time, honestly. You know, I made some friends in school here and there, but putting all of that aside, let's get into the pornographic addiction. I was a heavy masturbator. I'm talking about I would masturbate literally every hour, right? The moment I came back from school, the moment I came back from work, really, I wouldn't do any homework. When I came back from work, the first thing I would do, honestly, is I would just lay on my bed and I would beat it, you know? That's really, honestly, the first thing I would do when I got home. I didn't care about anything else. And it got to the point where, you know, I couldn't even really just lay down on my bed without masturbating. So what was I really going through in my mind? Like, why was I masturbating so much? And life here in this physical world, in this 3D world, is so boring, right? It's so boring. Almost nothing really excites you here, that I just had to experience some sort of alternative, some sort of euphoria. And that was through stimulating my genitals, right? Everything else was so boring, and I couldn't handle just the existence of time itself. I don't really have any hobbies. I was never really into hanging out with people, no friends, never been invited to a party or anything like that. A very clean-cut, boring life. And that's honestly because of the ideologies and the religion and the spiritual principles that I have ingrained in my own psyche, that kind of refrained me from gossiping and spending time clubbing and doing all sorts of immoral things that only satisfied the five senses, but don't really get you towards where people really want, which is happiness. And if anything, it offers more negative effects than good effects. And so that was really why I liked masturbating, because I said, okay, well, I don't have a girlfriend, you know, and I don't really care so much about having a girlfriend. What I really want to experience is love. What I really want to experience is the happiness and the joy and the escape that I would feel through masturbation. I felt that it offered me something, right? And so now with AI, I just kind of spent my time generating these females, these very stereotypical, very hot, sexy, blonde women, white women, using AI, you know, like that's basically what I would do. And I would just spend my time masturbating to AI videos and AI images that I myself generated using AI generation sites, you know, NSW, which is not safe for work, AI generated sites. Now, because of my upbringing and because of the politics and and everything that I had and the ideological stuff that I had ingrained in my head, there was one particular archetype that always stood in my mind, and that was the archetype of the Nordic person, right? The ideal Nordic person. Tall, you know, very slim, symmetrical, very refined features, blue eyes, blonde hair, like blonde as like the color of gold, right? Blue as the color of the sky, you know, blue eyes. And I've always kept that image in my mind as an archetype. If you're familiar with psychology, you've probably heard about the word archetype. It's a Jungian idea, right? Carl Jung, who was a Swiss psychoanalyst, funny enough, you know, he developed this theory that the mind creates mental construction based off of what we idolize, right? What the qualities that we enjoy, the qualities that we aspire, we create mental constructions or mental forms and images in our mind's eye that kind of represent that. And so I've always had this subconscious belief that the white European Nordic figure, right, man or woman, was basically like basically like heaven in form, right? All the beautiful qualities and the emotional qualities too: love, empathy, you know, compassion, beauty in the form of, you know, wholeness and spirituality and all that. I imagined it was being embodied in this particular form, this figure in my mind with blonde hair and blue eyes. Same thing why they depict all the angels as basically being these idolized European Caucasian looking people, right? That was the mental image that I had in my mind. And of course, in real life, you know, I'm not saying that I actually thought that people that looked like that were like angels or anything like that. Of course they're not. You know, growing up in California, I've known a lot of white guys and white people that look like that, and they're not at all held to those high standards. They still drink, they still party, they still smoke, they get tattoos, you know, which in my opinion is negative. And so they're definitely not to that higher ideal that I had pictured in my mind, right? Of how a person that imitates in form the idolized qualities of heaven and God should look like and should act like, you know. But I still nevertheless kept that idol in my mind, right? And so I had my own little idolatry going on. And honestly, when I started generating porn, you know, that's kind of what I was thinking about. I was kind of thinking about, I was projecting the qualities that I liked, the spiritual qualities, onto that form. And so here's when that all ended. So I decided one day to look up race preferences when it comes to dating. Okay. Oh yeah, we're getting there. Yeah, that's right. It's not your typical story about how you left pornography or how you left masturbation, but you know what? It's something that needs to be said. We are going down that route. I looked up which race women find most attractive of all race: white, black, Latina, Middle Eastern, doesn't matter, Filipina, Asian. And by and large, of course, not that much of a surprise, all the women around the world love white guys. And I was like, okay, well, that's pretty expected, right? And then I started researching surveys where people had asked white women, for example, do you have a strong preference for people within your skin tone or race? And I would say the majority, that is over 50% of the white women that these questions were raised towards, said yes, that they have a very strong preference for dating people within their skin tone or within their race, right? But then when they asked white men that same question, of course, being men, you know, we're the ones that carry the seed. We're a little bit more open, you know, regardless of what your color is, right? We're a little bit more open to dating, i.e. sex, because no one really cares about the dating part. They want to experience the orgasm. They want the quality in form, right? So nobody really cares about dating or getting to know each other. No, it's just, you know, the purpose of dating is because we find somebody physically attractive, right? And we want to get to know them better, i.e. we want to sleep with them. Men are definitely open to impregnating whoever, right? So white men, of course, they don't really have a strong racial preference, but white women, on the other hand, because women want to feel secure, they definitely did said, okay, yeah, no, I definitely have a strong preference for white men. White men say, no, I don't have a strong preference for just white women. I'm open to dating whoever. So then I kept looking, and then one thing led to another, and I realized that white women basically are the least likely not only to date outside of their race, right? And I'm not going to bore you with the statistics. You can look it up yourself. That's not what this video is about, right? This video is about me. I'm not going to bore you with stuff that you can look up on your own, you know. But white women definitely have a very strong racial preference, and they're the least likely, at least in the United States, and I would probably imagine elsewhere too, like in Europe as well. They're the least likely to date outside their race. They really don't want to date outside their race. They really do prefer staying within their group. And I see it all the time. Every time I go to the gym, right? Every time I go to a public place, doesn't matter. The context doesn't matter. All I see are white women with white men. You know, white women definitely don't really like dating brown guys, you know, people like me. I'm of Hispanic origin. And so I even found out that it's to the extent where white women actually have a very strong preference for white men, to the point where they don't even really care so much about socioeconomic status, right? They still value ethnicity more than that. right? So for all the people out there that say, oh, but it's all about money and status, not really. White men really do find white women find white men attractive, even in spite of socioeconomic status. So let me get to the point where it's about me. I read these stats, and let me drink some water first. I read these stats and I was already like, wow, okay. So this really did hurt me. It hurt me in a way that is beyond what most people would probably imagine. It wasn't just about, oh shucks, I couldn't get a girlfriend, right? Because if I'm being honest with you, let's be honest for a moment as men, right? You can get all the women you want, but there's still going to be an empty hole inside you that honestly will never be filled with anything material, anything from this world, which is why spirituality is important, by the way. No matter what you do, it doesn't matter how many cars you own, doesn't matter how many shoes you own, doesn't matter your status. You could be an actor, you could be someone like Jeffrey Epstein, who definitely gets all the white women. You could be somebody like that. Sorry for that, for that take, but it's true. And you would still, honestly, that's like putting lipstick on a skeleton, right? No pleasurable scenery that you imagine, your desire in this world will ever truly fulfill that empty hole that you have in your heart. So to me, reading those stats wasn't about having a girlfriend, because even if I do get a girlfriend, it's not really going to be something that I'm truly going to enjoy, right? If anything, it's going to make my life more difficult. I'm going to have more problems. I'm going to have to be more attentive to her. She's going to say things like, buy me a ring. Why don't you buy me anything? And I'm broke. I don't even have a job, right? And I'm not for that. I don't care about any of that, right? And that's just going to make my life a lot more stressful. Even if I do get a girlfriend, especially a white girlfriend, right? It really, women, like all egos, it's all about what can you do for me, right? It's all a transaction. It's calculative. What can you do for me? If you provide me my social needs, my primal needs, etc., then I'll give you what you want, which is sex and love, right? Which is literally just, two bodies kind of hanging around in the same space, I guess. So it's not really so much about that I didn't like. It was really that I had this mental image in my mind of basically the Nordic archetype, i.e. white woman, right, equals divinity, divinity equals love, love equals God. And so to me, when I read those stats, I was like, wow, I was really torn up. I was really torn up. Like instantly, the moment I read those stats, it wasn't about, oh, I can't get a girlfriend. It was about, in my head, I was like really making a movie in my head. It was more than that. It was about how love itself, real actual love, God, the divine, rejected me. And then I started thinking about what my dad and what my parents have told me since I was small about being a reincarnation from higher realms and higher celestial beings. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I don't look like that. I'm not a blonde-haired, blue-eyed person. So like, what happened, right? Am I an outcast, right? Did I get rejected by some of these celestial realms? Am I here in this hellhole that we call Earth as some sort of punishment? And so I start thinking about all sorts of stuff, and my mind starts making all sorts of associations, and then I just collapse, right? I went to bed. I had a deep sleep, and then I got up from that nap, and instantly my attraction to pornography, AI generated content was done. It was over, right? I literally couldn't get myself to desire that anymore. And so I started telling to myself, okay, well, if I continue with this pornographic addiction, given that I have an obsession with white women, but clearly, according to the stats, they don't want to date people like me. They don't want to date brown people. They don't want to date Latinos. They don't want to date, people of color, right? They want to date a Chad. They want to date some dude that's like from Scandinavia that doesn't look anything like me, right? And I'm a brown person. I started really thinking to myself, and I'm like, so, what am I doing with my life, right? Like I'm here masturbating to a woman that would never actually want to go out with me in real life, you know, who looks like that. And I'm the one that's actually messing up my life with this pornographic addiction, because I could be doing something better with my life. I could be actually experiencing better alternatives of joy and happiness that are not so tied to the physical. So then I started looking into energy transmutation. And I don't know how deep you guys are into this type of stuff, but suffice to say that we are said to have these things called chakras, which are inorganic, non-biological energy points that are invisible to the eyes of perception in this world, but we have them in our bodies, because our bodies are kind of like a denser form of our other bodies that we call the astral bodies, all still within perception. But I was able to transmute the need and the desire that I had to experience euphoria and to experience joy through orgasm by stimulating my genitals to my heart-based chakra, which is actually where they say is the center of your soul. The heart is actually where your soul lies. That's what they say. And oh man, I can tell you that when you really get into that, right? When you no longer truly value pornography and masturbation as the source of your happiness, or sex at all as the source of your happiness, because that's why people really chase women or men. They just want happiness, right? Because they feel like they're not fulfilled, like they're not whole if they don't have a partner in their lives, right? And I can tell you that you're going to experience real joy once you actually go through something a little bit traumatic. But if you can learn to actually transmute that energy into your heart-based chakra, which is actually the center of your joy, that's why when you get happy and you get excited, your heart starts beating a lot, chemicals start rushing in, you know, you feel real joy here, not really through your balls, here, right, through your heart. And so I started picking up a book called The Course in Miracles. And The Course in Miracles tells you about the laws of perception, how human psychology works. And it's not really human, because the main point of the Course in Miracles is that you're not really separate from God. You're not really separate from joy. You're not really separate from what you actually desire, which is an intimate relationship with the Father, with God, with Brahman, with whatever you want to call it, Source, God, etc. And you don't actually need to go through avenues like form, like the way I did, to reach Source, because Source, of course, is made up of spirit, and spirit cannot be perceived by your eyes. It doesn't exist within any level of perception. All is spirit, and that's what you are. You are mind. Mind being the Greek word for spirit. They're both the same thing. And the moment you start reading that book, you're going to understand the purpose of this reality. It doesn't get too much into mythology or anything like that. It's not like the Bible 2.0. This is basically a psychological workbook that actually tells you how perception functions, the laws of psychology, and the obstacles that you have built into your psychology that prevent you from achieving inner peace. And the moment I started reading The Course in Miracles, which I recommend everybody to do, by the way, if you're somebody that's really looking into spirituality, if you're somebody that's tired of the shenanigans of this world, and you know, it takes experience, right? You need experience, and you need to go through things in order to really understand, you know, like why this world is useless, why you as a spirit, as a son of God, which is the extension of the Father, why you cannot settle for littleness in this world. I would recommend you definitely pick up A Course in Miracles. Buy a copy and start reading it. Like that should really be the first thing that you should do. You know, they say that people can have several different reincarnations and lifetimes until they reach enlightenment, which is the realization that we're one with the universe, one with the Father, one with everything. But really, you don't want to delay the process too long. You don't want to delay the process too long. I would recommend that you pick up A Course in Miracles and you really start reading, right? You know, don't go to work. Like, if you have to, don't even go to work, right? You know, forget your job, forget all your responsibilities that you think you have in this world of perception, and just pick yourself a copy and start reading, because it's going to dramatically change your life once you actually start taking it seriously. And I might upload some videos about that, about spirituality and other spiritual principles from the Course in Miracles, which is a very good universal curriculum that I recommend everybody to read. The point is that you're not your body. You're not your ego. Your ego is but an illusion that is maintained solely within your mind. And that's not what you actually are. You are what perceives, which is mind. And mind is not separate from God. Everything is mind, and it's indivisible, right? It doesn't need to go through any of the weird layers or forms that our bodies or things in our body, like our digestive system, has to go through in order to reach a certain point. Mind is unlimited, right? As within the mind, so without. And so I started reading, and I started realizing that what people really crave every time they want sex, every time they want a relationship, is they want happiness. They want love. We're all looking for love in this world. And we think that what we find will give us that love, until we realize that it's very shallow and it's not meaningful at all. And so I stopped masturbating, not because I was forcing myself not to masturbate. This isn't some weird semen renunciation, whatever nonsense that Gen Z and Gen Alpha are looking into nowadays. This isn't some weird trend, right? This was born out of real desire, not to masturbate. This was real, actual desire that actually led me to this point where finally I can lay down, literally not do a single thing all day, not even meditate, and I won't even touch my balls once. I completely stopped doing that. And I think it's already been a month now since this happened, and I'm already succeeding. I can tell you I'm already succeeding. I never thought that this would be possible, especially at the age of 23 years old. I knew subconsciously that I would eventually stop masturbating, but I always thought that would be when I would be like, I don't know, an old guy, right? But I stopped masturbating, and I'm telling you right now, you really want happiness in your life, you're not going to get it through drugs, you're not going to get it through alcohol, you're not going to get it through women, you're not going to get it through fancy cars, you're not going to get it through earrings, check on my wrist, right? You're not going to get it through any of that. You're going to get it through God. And it takes real experience and trauma, kind of like the trauma I went through, to actually understand that. It's not a game, it's real. It's very much real. And so this is just a quick video, and when I say quick, I mean more than a half an hour, because I'm already at 32 minutes here. This is how I quit pornography. I know this is not a video that was expected for a lot of you people if you happen to stumble across this video, but it's a real video that I wanted to upload and talk about my experience with porn and whatever else. And if it helps anybody, good. I know that the topic, the exact purpose of why I quit pornography is not exactly what you probably had in mind. But nevertheless, it's a real story. It's a real raw story of how a young man who looks like he's in his 40s quit pornography. Okay. Anyway, guys, whoever's watching this, thank you. Thank you for tuning in and listening to my story. Take care. God bless.